What's up everybody? Welcome back to another video. I want to do something a little bit different today and start a new mini series that I've been thinking about for the last couple weeks here. This series is going to evolve around ranking my top 10 whatever it may be in the amusement park industry. And today I'm going to start with ranking my top 10 favorite roller coasters. So just a little background about me. I've been riding roller coasters since I was a kid. I haven't really tracked credits until the last couple of years here, so going back and thinking about some of the coasters I did when I was way younger has been a little bit tough, but I think I've done a good job of it. Right now I'm at 249 credits. I'm one away from 250. And this takes into account, all the coasters I did when I was a kid. So there are some kiddie coasters in there, but I don't really go out of my way to seek credits. I'm not that type of guy. You won't really see me, jimmying into a little kiddie coaster just to say I rode one more roller coaster. So more or less, these are 249 actual roller coasters. Like I said, there are a couple kiddies mixed in there, but mostly these are all legit. Living in North Carolina, I'm fortunate enough to have 3 parks, within 3.5 hours drive. So Carowinds, Busch Gardens, and King's Dominion all being close. Those were some of the parks that I grew up going to as a kid. Of course, traveling down to Orlando to see Disney World, Universal, SeaWorld, all that good stuff. That's really where my love for roller coasters spawned. And I have been, quite the enthusiast since I was maybe 10, 11 years old. I did take a bit of a gap there when I went off to school. There were about 5 or 6 years where I kind of put coasters and amusement parks on the back burner, and ever since graduation I've kind of rediscovered that love. So the last few years, being able to travel for work and things like that, I've been able to pick up a decent amount of credits and see some of these parks that I only dreamed about going to when I was a kid. So even though I don't have the richest background, I'm pretty proud of 249 coasters. Kind of excited to see what my 250th is here, but let's go ahead and get into the rankings. I'm going to start with my honorable mentions, and these are in no particular order. These are just the coasters I have, just outside my top 10. So again, in no particular order, I'm going to start with El Toro out of New Jersey at Six Flags Great Adventure. This is an awesome coaster packed with airtime. It's relentless from start to finish. The drop is incredible, especially in the back row. If you're able to experience that, I would highly recommend it. But it is showing its age. I unfortunately didn't get to ride it until about 2 years ago, so it was a little bit rougher in kind of the twister section towards the end. Nothing bad at all, and it honestly just kind of added to the experience of the relentlessness and how out of control this thing was. So really didn't take away from the ride for me at all, but I can see how some people that would aggravate them a little bit. But definitely a world-class coaster, one of the best wooden coasters ever built, that's for darn sure. The accident that happened recently was very unfortunate. Thankfully, nobody was hurt, and hopefully they were able to get the coaster up as soon as possible, because it really is one of the standout coasters at Great Adventure, and definitely one of the reasons that I was, so interested in visiting. All right, next up for honorable mentions, I have Time Traveler out of Silver Dollar City. This is really a one-of-a-kind roller coaster. When they announced this, the spinner aspect of it kind of made me think that it might not have been the biggest hit. I know a lot of people kind of have a negative connotation to the spinning coasters. A lot of them are more the wild mouse type, so something that's a little bit more extreme really flipped the industry on its head a little bit. But this coaster truly is incredible. The drop out of the station is a perfect way to get it started. Then, 2 more awesome launches, some crazy elements mixed in between, some great airtime. It really is just a one-of-a-kind, unique experience, and I can't really explain it honestly, because it was just straight fun from beginning to end. But this ride truly is the whole package. It's got great theming throughout. The station is awesome. Even the uniforms that the crew, the ride attendants were wearing were right on theme, and it really all blended together for this absolutely incredible experience. So for my next honorable mention, I have The Voyage out of Holiday World in Santa Claus, Indiana. So again, this is really a one-of-a-kind wood coaster. It seems like it goes on forever. The speed is absolutely relentless. It seems like it picks up speed as it goes along, which I don't really understand. But, it really is the total package. Airtime, great laterals, just great forces in general. Again, this is a very complete roller coaster. I wouldn't say it's smooth exactly, but it's definitely not jerky or bumpy or anything like that. It really just adds to that kind of out of control wood coaster experience. Another honorable mention would be Storm Chaser out of Kentucky Kingdom in Louisville. This is an amazing Rocky Mountain construction design coaster. It was actually one of the first RMCs that I've ever ridden, so I might be a little bit biased, but I have ridden it again recently since that first ride, and I think it still holds up. I actually think it's gotten better over time. I think for whatever reason it's gotten faster, but it is just relentless from start to finish. The end section has ridiculous ejector airtime and some very unique elements that really has made RMC who they are. But again, just a somewhat lengthy, well-paced coaster. Great forces, great airtime throughout, and really just a good time. My last honorable mention will be one that actually lived in my top 10 for quite some time, and I'm kind of sad to see it bump down the list a little bit. Another great coaster. This is Goliath out of Six Flags over Georgia. I know there's 1,000,001 Goliath coasters in the Six Flags chain, but this one really sticks out to me. As you'll see in my top 10 list, I'm a sucker for B&M hypers, so this being one of the better ones, of course, it's pretty high on my list. The interaction with the front gate of this park is really cool, and the helix, pretty much adjacent to the front of the park, is very forceful. I've actually grayed out in it a couple times, but it's just a really great, well-paced hyper with awesome airtime and a rather smooth ride experience. Alright, so finally getting into my top 10 list. Starting at number 10, I have Afterburn out of Carowinds in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, this one's probably a little bit higher on my list than most, but again, I am probably a little bit biased having it 2.5 hours down the road from me. I just think it's such a solid invert. It is a little bit on the shorter side. I just think the pacing of the coaster and the relentlessness of the elements kind of back to back just makes up for that shorter ride time. It is very intense for an invert. I know B&M's inverts can be a little bit more intense, especially the older style coasters, but it is an awesome experience. Really, anywhere you sit in the train, the back has incredible whip through the bat wing and through the last corkscrew, but of course the front of the coaster is awesome. As with any invert, just being able to see everything and see where you're going. It is cool to kind of see yourself be able to dive into those trenches in the front row, so I definitely recommend checking that out as well. But really just a complete roller coaster experience. Well themed. I still wish I had the Top Gun theme like it did when I was a kid, but otherwise a really great experience and definitely worthy enough for number 10 on my list. For number 9, I have Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm. Really incredible park, great theming throughout, and this coaster is no different. It fits in perfectly with the Ghost Town section of the park, and again, just an awesome experience from start to finish. The first drop isn't anything exciting, but it really gets good after that, especially at night. I would not pass up a night ride on this coaster if you have the opportunity. I never got to ride it prior to the GCI retracking. I only first got the chance to ride it about 2 years ago prior to the pandemic. I thought it was very smooth. Actually, one of the smoother wooden roller coasters that I've ever experienced. And it really allowed you to kind of enjoy all those forces. The laterals and that helix towards the end are incredible. There's some awesome airtime throughout. And there's some really cool surprising moments, within the structure. And again, this is a coaster that almost feels like it gets better as it goes along. All right, number 8 on my list. This one's going to be a little bit different than a lot of other people out there, but that's the beauty of having your own list. I don't care what other people think, and these are my opinions. No, I'm just kidding. I really appreciate everyone else's take on it. I love hearing varying opinions, and I just love, chatting about it in general. So with that, at number 8, I have a B&M floorless model. It is actually Superman Krypton coaster out of Six Flags Fiesta, Texas in San Antonio. Now this is a ride I experienced in 2004 when I was only 13 years old. So I haven't been able to get back to it to get another ride, unfortunately, to see if my opinion holds up. But to my 13 or 14-year-old self, this really was a one-of-a-kind experience. The interaction that it has with the quarry wall, the first drop, down off the quarry wall was really something that I didn't really expect going in. I didn't do a whole lot of research around this park before we visited. They had just built this massive B&M coaster on the side of a cliff, essentially. It was super forceful when I rode. I'm not, a real inversion heavy guy, but this one really was well done, and I thought it packed, some pretty extreme forces throughout. Again, this is something I'll need to re-ride because my 13-year-old opinion might have changed over the years. I was able to ride it in one of the first years of its existence, so I'm sure it was as smooth as can be. I hope it hasn't aged poorly. From what I've heard, it still holds up very well, so I'm excited to get back down there and test it out again. Alright, sticking with B&M for my number 7 coaster, I have Montu out of Busch Gardens, Tampa. So similar to my love for Afterburn, this is an old school B&M invert, very whippy, very forceful, and really some one-of-a-kind terrain interaction. The way it dives in and out of the trenches, going through the bat wing, going through some of those corkscrews, it really is a quite of a unique experience. Just the intensity of the ride is what does it for me. A lot of these coasters nowadays are a little bit more graceful and a little bit smoother, especially the newer B&Ms. So this is kind of a refreshing take on, how B&Ms used to be, how they need to be. Kumba across the park is very similar as well. Kind of that old school B&M feel. The Monty truly is a world-class coaster. It deserves all the praise that it's gotten over the years. It's almost 25 years old at this point, so the fact that it's held up so well over all this time speaks volumes to B&M. And also to Busch Gardens Tampa for their maintenance department, how well they've done it at the upkeep of this coaster. All right, coming in at number 6 on my list, I have Millennium Force at Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. We made our first visit to Cedar Point in the early 2000s, and this was, of course, tops on my list. This was one of the coasters that I really followed the entire construction process throughout. In the early stages of the internet, it was really cool to kind of follow along day by day of their construction progress. This coaster just further ignited my love for the industry. I was so psyched that Cedar Point was doing something that was, pushing the boundaries so much. And being able to ride this thing for the first time in 2003 was unlike anything I've ever experienced before. So I know over the past 20 years, this coaster has lost a bit of its luster and unfortunately gets a little bit of hate from the coaster enthusiast community. But I think it still packs a great punch. The back row is a great experience. It's got excellent airtime throughout. The front row, love getting the bugs in your face on those summer nights. But really anywhere this coaster, delivers, and it's just plain fun, honestly. I don't know how anyone can bash this ride, especially for how instrumental it was, in the coaster wars for Cedar Point and just for the rest of the industry. It's really an icon, and we should be thankful that it exists and it still delivers amazing rides to this day. So next up on my list, I'm staying at the Peninsula of Cedar Point. For number 5, I have Steel Vengeance, another Rocky Mountain construction coaster. So this was the reincarnation of Mean Streak, a classic large den woody that came out in the early 90s. I did get the chance to ride Mean Streak actually in the last week of its operation, and it was brutally rough. So Steel Vengeance is a welcome change. This coaster is just ridiculously intimidating to look at. Some of the elements just look vicious, and it really is no different when you're on the coaster. From start to finish, it is relentless. It's packed with airtime, almost to the point where if you're a taller individual, you'll get some bruising on your thighs or a little bit of a rider fatigue, if you will, but it really is worth it. Definitely a one-of-a-kind experience. I would say for sure RMC's best work. This is a ride where you can pretty much sit anywhere in the train and it delivers an incredible ride. I will say the back row getting whipped over that first drop is pretty nutty, but the front row is great. See, the front row actually I think offers a little bit more airtime, so you really can't go wrong. Even the middle of the train is still ridiculous. So this is really a world-class coaster. It definitely deserves all the hype it gets. I know a lot of people have this as number 1, and I've kind of tossed it around here and there. I'm definitely excited to ride it again and kind of see how it stacks up against some of my other favorites here. But as of right now, again, I have it in my number 5 position. The coaster just looks mean, honestly. The elements are very snappy. It takes everything at a very high speed. And really from start to finish, you don't know where the heck you're going or what's coming up next. The last section kind of diving in and out of the structure itself. It almost feels like you're riding a bucking bronco. The last couple airtime hills really wreck my thighs, but it's so worth it. All right, heading down south for my number 4 coaster, I have Mako at SeaWorld Orlando. So I do feel like I have a pretty good spread here in my top 10, but I do have such an affinity for the B&M Hypers and Gigas. This one being no exception, especially being one of their newer designs. I feel like they've really perfected this coaster type, and Mako is just the best example of it. There's awesome floater on this coaster, some great ejector over the speed hill, towards the end of the ride. It is one of the smoothest experiences I've ever had on a roller coaster, so really anyone can enjoy this. It's got some awesome theming throughout, and the finale, speeding over the lake in the center of SeaWorld is really cool. But again, really just a complete roller coaster, but definitely one of the coasters that you could pretty much just sit on all day and re-ride and never get tired of. It's not one of those ones that is physically taxing to where you're gonna do a couple rides and you need a break or something like that. This is very graceful and smooth. Honestly, it seems like something my mom would enjoy. It really just is a fun and thrilling roller coaster. All right, we finally made it to the top 3. Earning my 3rd spot, I have Fury 325 out of Carowinds in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I'm ridiculously lucky to have this coaster within a 2-hour drive. And honestly, I take that for granted a little bit, but this thing is an absolute unit. Just seeing it off the highway on your way into Carowinds kind of gets your nerves going a little bit because it is really one of the most massive structures that you'll ever see. The ride experience is unlike anything other. The speed is absolutely incredible, and this is only amplified when you get a front row ride. I would highly recommend checking out both the front and the back because I would say they both offer pretty differing experiences. I do slightly prefer the front just for that sensation of speed and some of the good airtime that it provides. But the back has an absolutely nasty whip over the first drop, so definitely check that out as well. But this coaster is just relentless. It keeps up its speed all the way throughout. The hive dive is a really cool element that interacts with the front of the park and makes for some good photo ops. But this is obviously a world-class coaster. The two that I have above it, it's all subjective, so I can understand why a lot of people have this as their top. It really is an amazing addition to Carowinds and has definitely put this park on the map. So hopefully a lot more to come from Carowinds and my quasi home park. Alright, number 2 on my list has actually been my number 1 for the longest time until about 3 months ago. I have Maverick at Cedar Point. So ever since I rode Maverick, it has sat at the top of my list. It really is just everything I love about a roller coaster. It might not be the tallest in the world, but it is really just a relentless ride all the way through. Some pretty extreme forces, especially in the second half of the ride when you get up to over 70 miles per hour off that second launch. The airtime is great. I hear some people have some issues with the harder Intamin restraints. That's not something that I've experienced personally. I can see where that will kind of detract from the experience for a lot of people. But again, another very unique coaster, another Intamin design. I have a few of them on my list here. I'm a big fan of their, innovative, really creative work. Always pushing the boundaries, always pushing the limits. Unfortunately, maybe not the most reliable rides. I know they're a headache for a lot of these parks that own and operate these things, but from an enthusiast standpoint, it really doesn't get any better than this coaster. Except for me it does, because I obviously have it at number 2. So my number 1 coaster is VelociCoaster at Universal Orlando Resort, specifically at Islands of Adventure. Another Intamin design. This thing is just crazy. This is another ride that I've followed along with the construction from start to finish. This coaster really is a game changer for Islands of Adventure. After Dueling Dragons got replaced by a more mild type ride, they kind of needed another intense thrill attraction to kind of fill that gap. So this coaster fits the bill perfectly. The first section, the first launch isn't the most intense, but it does a great job of kind of building the story. There's some great show elements prior to that first launch. The first twister section is just fun. It's not the most intense, but there's some great theming, some great terrain interaction, kind of diving and weaving through all that rock work, and seeing those velociraptors in there is really cool. It kind of just sets the stage for the more intense second half of the coaster. The second boost where you get up to full speed and finally fly over the top hat. What an awesome feeling, such an intense launch. Hearing the noise of those LSMs kick in and just feeling that, force of the launch push you back in your seat is really incredible. Of course, you get awesome views going over that top hat. It is for a short period of time because you're, seconds later careening back down to earth and through a couple more unique elements. Of course, the stall over the midway, the double helix with some pretty wicked turns in there, over banks and outer banks as well. And finally ending with the Mosasaurus roll over the lagoon. This coaster is unlike any other just because, to me, it gets more and more intense throughout. It just kind of builds and builds and builds and finally hits that finale with the Mosasaurus roll. It is an awesome climax to the entire experience. And again, just unlike anything else that I've ridden before. It is the total package. The theming, the queue is breathtaking, really. They have dinosaur animatronics in there unlike anything I've ever seen before, and it's just a fun experience. It's an entertaining walkthrough even if you weren't to get on the coaster, but all that theming just serves to build the anticipation even more and get you even more hyped for that ride. So again, this is my number 1. I don't think anything comes near this coaster, at least that I've experienced thus far. There are some coasters out there that a lot of people have compared the VelociCoaster to. Terran over in Phantasialand being very high on a lot of people's lists, and of course with the theming interactions there, it has a lot of similarities to VelociCoaster. So hopefully I'll get over there and check that one out at some point. But again, VelociCoaster is the top dog in my opinion, and it's going to take something pretty remarkable to knock it off of number 1 for me. So that's it. There you have it. Those are my top 10 coasters. A lot of people have asked me, what is my favorite roller coaster? Probably weren't really asking for as in-depth of a list as I've just given, but I know a lot of enthusiasts out there will appreciate it. I'm not too strict or too crazy about keeping, a well-defined top 50, top 100 list, whatever. These top 10, top 15 are good enough for me. And when I ride something that comes along that, you know, unseats one of these coasters, I pretty much know it, because these are on the upper echelon of any coaster out there, especially, you know, the ones that I've experienced. But I'm just so grateful and lucky to have experienced some of these things that I have, and hopefully keep it going here and add another 249 to my list. With that, thank you for watching. If you have any differing opinions or you want to share your top 10 list, feel free to sound off in the comments. If you like this video, go ahead and give me a like. I'm gonna have a couple more coming out just like this, where I'm gonna rate my favorite amusement parks, other things along those lines. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But otherwise, thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.